I don't usually advise people to turn a hobby into a business because it's a real good way. First of all, you don't do that with other hobbies. No one's like, oh man, I can't wait till I start making money from building Legos, right? Nobody in their right mind says I'm going to try and monetize my model train set building hobby. It's ridiculous. But somehow with podcasting, since there are people doing it for a living, they're like, I got to do it where it's monetized. And it's like, why? So don't do that, because not only are you ruining your hobby for the most part, many of the time, just start to focus on the wrong things.
Yeehaw! What's up, everybody? Your life alchemist, your dragon. Welcome to Alchemize Life. I'm your host, Justin David Carl. This is a show where I seek out and share expertise, wisdom, and thought leadership in all domains with the mission of empowering and inspiring you to proactively design and truly live a life worth living. We're all in this together, and when we do the work together, we go so much farther, so much faster, and have so much more fun. Without further ado, let's dig into this episode and alchemize life. Jordan Harbinger, finally got you on the show. I'm a huge, long-time fan. And just to set the scene and introduce you to my audience, you're one of the top podcasters who's been podcasting since 2006. You literally get 11 million downloads per month. Tons of high-profile clients on your podcast, people like Kobe Bryant, even the head of the CIA. You were voted one of Apple's top podcasts in 2018. You started your solo podcast in 2018 as well. You've been kidnapped twice. A former Wall Street lawyer, a former coach, husband, father of two. Welcome to the show, brother. It's so good to have you here.
Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate you listing all of the positive things I've done in my entire life in one sentence. That makes it sound much more impressive than it actually feels.
Next, when I have you back on the show, we'll start with all of the terrible things that you've done. That would make...
There you go. Like, this guy failed AP chemistry exam, did not do well in honors math in high school.
Awesome.
Like, lived mostly in incel for much of college. Jordan Harbinger, everybody.
Perfect. Well,
yeah.
One of the biggest reasons I wanted to bring you on the show was because, I really admire you. I look up to you as somebody who has, literally decades of podcasting experience. And as someone who's, at the very beginning of his podcasting career, I couldn't think of someone better to just interview about how to actually build a podcast. So for the audience, Jordan has done a ton of interviews about like his whole life story, and we'll put some links to some good episodes in the show notes. But because I have about 40 minutes with Jordan, we're going to be hyper focused on some of the topics that we want to cover. One of the main ones being like how to actually build a podcast. So just a quick little, a few sentences about your journey. You were actually a Wall Street lawyer, like you went to a great college. When and why did you leave that world?
Yeah, I left Wall Street. Going to law school is a thing that a lot of people do when they don't know what else to do with their lives and they feel comfortable in an academic environment. And I won't say overachievers because it sounds self-aggrandizing, but people who do well in school, they often go, oh my God, what am I going to do in the real world? And they'll get bad advice that's like, go to law school because you like talking, or some other just complete bullshit. And it's not a good reason to go to law school. Most people who go to law school, they go for reasons that are actually bad reasons to go. And I was just one of many casualties of the trend of going to law school when you didn't know what else you wanted to do with your life. So I went there. Then I was like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. So I graduated in the top, half or third of my class, whatever it was, got a good job on Wall Street because they were recruiting. And it was like, you can either try really hard to find a meaningful job, or you can just show up to these recruiting places and basically raise your hand to go to New York City and make 130 grand a year, 160 or whatever it was. the first year out of school. And I was like, sure, sounds great to me. Let's do that. Let's pay some student loans. So I got in there for that reason. And you asked how I got out. The reason I got out was because, like most people who do that, I realized real quickly, I probably don't fit here. I'm never going to be able to like convince myself that this is fun or interesting or exciting. I just took this job for money. It's probably not a good way to spend the next decades of my life. So I should probably stop doing that. And luckily, like many things that happen in life, the choice was essentially made for me because we had the 2008 recession about a year and a half after I joined the law firm. Maybe not even that far. And they said, look, you don't have to do any work. We're still going to pay you full salary and benefits because we don't want to screw up your career by laying off 55 or whatever it was, 53 kids who joined us because they trusted we would actually have something for them to do. But they said, you should start looking for another job. And so I started applying for other things, but I thought, why am I going to, in a recession, look for another job that I don't even want? That just doesn't make any sense. It's like when people say alcohol is an acquired taste. It's like, well, why would I acquire a taste for something that's actually bad for me? Right? I made that mistake, and I still love things like scotch, so oops. But the thing is, if you don't drink because you don't like it, trying to make yourself like it makes absolutely no fucking sense, right? So it's the same thing with a career. If you're like, oh, this is terrible, well, you can acquire the taste for doing some meaningless paperwork that makes rich people richer, or helps Saudi Aramco invest in petroleum futures. Or you can do something totally different. And it's like, why would I acquire this taste if I have options? And the reason many people stick around is because they feel like they don't have options. I did have options. The options were stick with doing what I'm doing now in the law firm or a different law firm and try and make money. Go work at some place like, be a police union attorney or something along those lines. Or I'd already started moonlighting on Sirius XM satellite radio to do my show there, or a version of my show there. This is really, really early in the game. And I thought, I'm doing this podcast. I'm on nationally syndicated, essentially, satellite radio. It's not really syndicated, but it's on satellite. It's in the US and Canada. If I wasn't good enough to be a broadcaster, Sirius XM wouldn't be like, hey, why don't you have your own show during the evening drive? That doesn't make any sense. So doing a podcast, you kind of feel like, well, anybody can do a podcast, and that's still true today. I mean, look at a lot of the hey, you're a classic example, Justin. You're doing a podcast. Did anybody give you permission to do it? No. Right? So, but with the radio thing, I was like, well, wait a minute. I took that as sort of like a stamp of approval from professionals, right? They were like, well, he doesn't suck enough at this where we would not let him do a radio show. So he must have I thought I must have some talent / skill in this area. So I just decided to go in all in on that. I understand why somebody else who had nothing else going on and they thought they were going to be a lawyer for 20 years freaked out when they got laid off. I was like, sweet, you're going to keep paying me and all I have to do is just stop showing up and I can go do other things that I actually want to do. Great. So that's how I got out. It was really, the recession of 2008 was bad for most people, but for me, it was one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
Hey there, just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. Today's show is brought to you by Veg Nutrition, Live Better. So I'm actually a Veg elite athlete, and before I joined the team, I spent months doing my due diligence to make sure that the company was vision, mission, and value aligned with me, my values, my mission, my vision, and my lifestyle. I got to know the owners super well. I even got to know the person who formulates all the products, and they passed with flying colors. So I couldn't be more excited to represent a company that I feel so aligned with. And I want to tell you about two of my favorite products. The first is the Veg Pre-Workout. So when I first went vegan, or mostly vegan, the last thing for me to go fully vegan was finding a vegan pre-workout that gave me the focus, the energy, and the power that I was looking for. And I can tell you, this is the best pre-workout that I've ever had. It gives me incredible focus and energy. And what's probably the best is it leaves me with no crash after I take it, which is great. And the flavors are so freaking good. There's literally peach mango and a Patriot Pop that tastes like, the firecracker popsicles, cherry lemon lime flavor. They're literally so good that I can dry scoop them. And they just released a watermelon flavor for just in time for summer, and it's incredible. So that's the first product. The second product is arguably also my favorite, and that's the plant protein. Comes in 3 incredible flavors: chocolate peanut butter, vanilla ice cream, and cold brew coffee. Yep, you heard me. Cold brew coffee flavor. It tastes incredible, all 3 flavors, 25 grams of protein, fully organic, incredible ingredients, heavy metal tested, and it is my go-to post-workout. Make sure that I'm recovering and refueling and giving my muscles the protein that they need to rebuild for that next workout. So go to vegnutrition.com/dragon and try their full line of supplements, and you'll get 15% off. Or you can just use Dragon at checkout and you'll get 15% off. So that's vegnutrition.com/dragon to get 15% off. Veg Nutrition, live better. That's hilarious and awesome at the same time. I can totally relate. So, I went to Stanford for undergrad, and I also didn't know what to do afterwards. So I did several different investment banking internships trying to acquire a taste for something that I definitely did not like. Fortunately, I didn't succumb to, much more than about a year and a half worth of internships in investment banking, but I can totally relate because it's just like the most like, whether it's, working on Wall Street, in the finance world of investment banking or, being a lawyer, it's like the most like mind numbing, monotonous, like just work you just don't care about.
They fucking know that. Because that's why they pay you $400,000 a year or whatever as an investment banker on year 3, right? Yep. You're supposed to go, if I just sacrifice a little bit more of my soul, I'm going to get enough money to earn to buy, rent out an apartment like that and get a bike or whatever, a car, a friend, a wife, whatever it is. They know that. Yep. Because fulfilling awesome jobs usually don't go, man, we got to bribe these people with money to do this amazing public service thing that's really rewarding. People do it because it's really rewarding. Nobody's like, I love subprime mortgages. These are so interesting. That no one, with very few exceptions, so they know they have to pay you. And that, so people really, at the end of the day, if you really just admit it, you have to be really interested in money. And I never was interested in money. I really wasn't. And so growing up, I wasn't. And so when the rubber met the road and everyone's like, you're crazy, you're finally making a bunch of money, I was like, but I never gave a shit. And now I either have to rejigger my whole life to give a shit or realize that this is not the key to happiness and go and do something else. Yeah. And I'm lucky that I got the boot early enough where I was flexible, had no responsibility other than student loans, that I could start something new. Because it was, I was 27, 26 years old. I wasn't like, are you kidding me? I have 2 kids. Like, I can't retrain. I can't start a hobby business and survive on that. I wouldn't want to do it now in my current stage of life. It's just, there's too much going on.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious, how long were they paying you for? Like, how much runway?
1 year. So, but it started in I want to say, I think I got like 8 months of full salary and benefits or 9 months of full salary and benefits. Because I think it was like we ran through from summer through February, and then or maybe it was May. Everything. The timeline's a little hazy. One of our major clients, I think it was Bear Stearns or Lehman Brothers, one of the two, collapsed in, I want to say, May of 2007 or 8. No, it had to be 2008, right? So then they were like, "Oh, we don't have any work for you anymore. Like that's it." And it's again, the timeline's hazy. Maybe they didn't collapse then, but they were like, we're not doing any of these projects anymore. So that's when we just stopped doing work. And then they're like, oh, do your continued learning education, do your credits for this. Oh, help let's all do pro bono stuff because we all have time. And then it was like, this is pretty serious, man. But it was like 3 months that they kind of handed out a little bit of stuff, but it was like 3 hours of work a day. Then it was like 3 hours of work a week. Then it was, you don't really need to come in anymore, dude. This is not, you don't have to just sit here all day. This is stupid, and then I realized this is pretty meaningful. And then they had that whole thing, like everybody come into the conference room. We're not laying you off, but we are telling you that in December, you got to get the fuck out. But in the meantime, enjoy all your money that we're going to give you and maybe pay your student loans off. So that's what I did. I just like paid loans, and lived like a college student and then said, okay, if I save a bunch of money, I can have 6, 7, 8 months of runway, maybe even a year. And it can't take that long to start a business and get it off the ground, right? So, of course, that's nonsense. But at least I had a bunch of money that I could live on for at least, I think I stretched it out to like 18 months or more.
Oh, wow.
At that point. So basically, my Wall Street misadventure funded what I have now, which is hilarious.
That's great. I mean, what a ironic and awesome story. So I'm curious. So you basically get paid to go, take a foray into your, podcasting entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Like, how did you get started? You already had a, serious radio show. What was that about? And then like, how did you start to translate that into like, making a living out of it?
Yeah. Well, I was doing the podcast. I was doing the show, the satellite show. And early on, people were like, hey, I want you to coach me. And I'm like, I can't. I'm not a coach. I'm not certified. And then one guy finally was like, hey, I got a secret for you. There's not really a such thing, at least in 2006, 2007, as a certified coach. And if there is, I don't care. This is a guy who ran a mortgage bank. And he's like, I hire coaches all the time. I don't think any of them have a degree in coaching. They're just experts. And you're an expert in this. And I'm like, well, not really. And he's like, no. You are, because I've hired other people for the same stuff you're talking about. And they have nowhere near the level of depth of knowledge that you have. And I'm thinking, how can that be true? All I do is read books and then regurgitate information and talk to other experts and then put the pieces together and practice things and put them into my business or in my life. And the guy's like, dude, that's way more than most of these so-called coaches do, who read a PDF online and then start holding themselves out as coaches. Like, a lot of coaches were real estate agents a month ago, and before that they were crypto bros. I mean, they weren't back then, but the thing now is like, they start off in real estate, they go into cryptocurrency, something, and then it's like ... life coach. And it's the story of so many coaches. And I'm sure being in the industry now, you see it over and over. It's like, oh, are you kind of fit? Be a personal trainer that's not certified in anything.
Yep.
It's like, oh, are you sort of look good in pictures? Well, you're a model now. Better come up with an Instagram. It's just nonsense, and it's all part of this sort of like personal branding thing. And back then, I thought, well, you can't just pretend to be a lawyer without a certification. There's no way you could just pretend to be a coach. And it's like, nope, you totally can. So people started paying us hourly, and I had major imposter syndrome. And the first thing I said was, I'm not a coach. I'm not certified, but I'm happy to help consult with whatever you want. And we started talking about those clients because they were super satisfied with us. We started talking about those clients on the podcast, and people were like, oh, I didn't realize we could hire you. So we started doing phone coaching, and I started making a few $1,000s a month laying on a hammock in the backyard and talking on Skype. And I said to myself, like, we're really onto something here.
Like the coaching focus? Like, what type of coaching was it around?
Dating and relationships primarily. You know, guys, I was 27 years old, and I was like, guys, it's about working on yourself. It's about nonverbal communication. It's about not being jealous and insecure. And here's all these things you can do to work on yourself. And people were like blown away by this. Because again, remember, this is early days. There's no such thing as the pickup artist movement or whatever. It's not misogynistic. It's not gross. Women loved that guys were starting to learn this stuff. Guys were like, wait, so it's not just crappy chat up lines, pickup lines. No, that really was novel. Nobody was doing this. Nobody was talking about this. And it was highly effective. And it was kind of like self-help, but like relevant for guys my age and younger and a little bit older for that matter. And then sales guys started doing it because it worked with, it sort of dovetailed with what they were doing. And then married guys were like, this is helping in my marriage. So I felt really good about that. And I thought, well, there's no actual real experts doing anything like this that have certification. And if what I'm doing is working for people, then that's good enough. So the phone coaching started us off. And then one of my phone coaching clients was like, I just need to come and hang out with you guys because I'm not a guy who learns from auditory stuff. Like I listen to your podcast, but I just need to see it in action. I need to come out and absorb it. So he wanted to come and live near us or stay in a hotel near us. And I was like, this is weird. I'm not doing that. This is a guy off the internet, right? This is 2007. It's not like you meet people online back then in real life. And he goes, look, I'll give you $5,000 for the week. And I was like, you're in, man. I got a couch for you. I'll buy a mattress. I don't give a crap. $5,000? Are you crazy? So this guy ended up staying for a week and then another week later on. And I talked about that on the show. And people were like, oh, we can come and live with you for $5,000 a week. And then I started getting people applying to come and live with me for a week and show them all of these things. And we got so busy, so inundated so quickly that I ended up hiring other people to come and work with me during that first bit. And it was really funny because I lived in this dope Wall Street apartment that had like a pool in the basement, and I had like a sick roof deck furnished by some designer named Philippe Stark. It's like this fancy architectural whatever. There's a game room. I mean, this was like a really, 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 really nice spot on Wall and Broad across from the stock exchange. So everyone who lived there was in a $2 to $3 to $4 million condo, right? That's what these places were in 2007 or 2006, whatever it was. And so like, but I had 4 extra, 5 extra, 6 extra dudes living in there. And the doormen are like, I don't think you can do this. And the co-op board was like, bro, are you the guy with all the guests? What's going on? I'm like, I just have a lot of friends. So it's funny because later on, I mean, they started to hate us because, of course, when you have everyone else is rich and doing their thing, and I've got like 6 25-year-olds sleeping on couches, and they're like, we got to do something about this occupancy level. And I'm like, show me the bylaws, right? And there's nothing in there. And I'm like, well, it doesn't say I can't have guests. You can't tell me I can't have guests. And it was just like, I remember people being like, I know you guys are doing something. I know you guys are doing something in there. I just can't prove it. But the doormen loved us. We would always buy them food. We'd tip them really well. So they were like, well, I didn't see you guys come in at 3 o'clock in the morning. I didn't see anybody move a bunch of bags in here. I didn't see that guy staying here for a month, so it was all kinds of stuff like that. It was shady, and I now feel bad for my neighbors now that I'm an adult with responsibilities and kids. But we basically created a residential boot camp, which we later ended up calling it the residential boot camp, for guys to come and learn dating, relationship, nonverbal communication, persuasion, things like that. And it was awesome. It was like a very unique experience, and guys came from all over the world. I mean, South Africa, they came from as far as Australia and South Africa and Europe and, all over the United States and Canada to come and sleep on a freaking couch or an airbed and crash with me and my instructors. And it was great. And it was fun. And we did a lot of good for a lot of people. And then, you grow out of that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm guessing you got married. That may have had something to do with it.
I did get married. I did get married, and also I moved a bunch, and I found that the lifestyle is for younger guys. Like, I'd hire guys, and they would be really good at what they did, but they would be kind of like, they'd be kids, they'd start stealing something, or they couldn't show up for work on time, or they couldn't show up sober, or whatever it was. And I'm like, guys, this is a job, and as I got older and they had to stay younger because they have to go out every night with the clients, I'm like, I'm going to be less and less relevant, but also this is going to annoy me more and more and more.
Yeah.
At one point it was like, yeah, we all share one bathroom, fine. Or 2 bathrooms, fine. But at some point it's like, shut the hell up, I'm trying to sleep. Oh my God, I'm old. Yeah. Right? And then also there was, I just started to think like, okay, I don't love doing this anymore, which is always a red flag. And I stopped doing it, and I started another business. And what's really interesting is right when I left, about a year or so later, the Me Too movement really, really kicked off. And I was like, oh, stuff like that I'm doing, while not misogynistic at all and has a lot of female fans, it's kind of getting harder and harder to explain. Especially as there's all these guys that say they're doing the same thing as us, but really it's just completely date rapey, frankly. And I don't mean that as a joke. I mean, there was a lot of like guys that are like, oh yeah, we do the same thing as the Jordan Harbinger and those crew, but it would be like they lie to women, we lie to, I was going to say we lie to women because I'm talking in their perspective, but I don't want this soundbite to end up in the wrong place. But they would like lie to women, they would be like plying them with alcohol, and I'm like, this is not the same thing. I'm talking about working on yourself. I'm talking about deserving what you want. These a-holes are out there saying they're doing the same thing so they can capture some of our market share, but really they're just garden variety dickbag dudes who are victimizing women. And then, so as that started to trend up and the Me Too thing started to trend up and my age started to trend up, I was like, this is a bad combination. I'm out. So I left my old business. They are still doing that stuff, which I'm like, what? But of course, it's nothing like it used to be. Now it's just a cash grab, in my opinion.
Yeah. Hey there. Just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. This show is brought to you by Feel Free from Botanic Tonics. This product is unlike anything I've ever had before. No joke. It's made with kava root and other ancient plants, and just half a shot gives me this incredible sense of focused flow and productivity. And I love to take just half a shot right before I work out. I take it with my pre-workout, and it takes my workouts to the next level. It is seriously unlike anything I've ever had. It's also an incredible productivity tool for any big work projects that you have or long periods of time where you just need to be super focused in flow state and get a lot of shit done. So if you want to give this a shot, you can go to botanictonics.com and use code DRAGON at checkout to get 40% off your first order. No joke. 40% off with code DRAGON. That's Feel Free from botanictonics.com, code DRAGON. Feel free, feel good. Well, pretty fascinating journey. Appreciate you sharing it with me and the audience. I want to transition into you went solo podcasting. I know you had a show with other hosts previously, but I'm just, for somebody like me who's just starting to build their show, or if you had to start all over from scratch to build your show, like, how do you get to 11 million downloads a month? Like, what would you, if you took me on as a podcasting coaching client, like, what are the best practices? Like I don't even know what metrics to track. Start to walk me through like how you would think about it and or coach somebody to do it.
Yeah, let's say there's a reason I don't have podcast coaching clients, because it is very much, it's an artistic pursuit. It's a creative pursuit. There's no, like when I was on Wall Street, it was junior associate, the investment banks, okay, you're an intern, you're an analyst, you're a associate, you're a MD. I don't even remember the progress in those things, right? The managing director, or VP, MD, however it goes. In creative pursuits, that doesn't exist, right? And so you're doing your thing, and then one day something hopefully pops off, and you're like, wow, that actually worked out, and my parents aren't ashamed of me anymore. Awesome. There's no corporate ladder to climb. So for me, I never focused on money. I always focused on what turned out to be the right thing, which was, I thought, okay, what can I do that serves the audience the best way? And so when I was doing that in my old business, it was because if we do that, people will sign up for our live classes or our online stuff. And that worked really well, because it was like, give away the farm and people will realize there's more to learn from you. Even if they think, oh, I already know all this stuff already because I listen to the podcast, cool, but they'll still want to support you. They'll come and learn from you in person, or they'll find that they have gaps that can only be filled by what you teach, whatever it was. So that worked then. And then when I started the Jordan Harbinger show, the current iteration of what I'm doing, I thought, do I want to do anything different? Because that really worked well for my old show. So I started to realize, no, I still want to give everything away. I'm just going to have sponsors that sponsor the show. I don't even want to sell anything to the audience because that was always the most kind of time consuming, but also high pressure part of everything. And I realized I'd be giving up a large segment of my income, but I also didn't care. And that was great because it allowed me to focus on creating really, really good content, doing ad swaps with other podcasters, going on other shows like this, not holding back and being like, well, it's all in my online course, $5.99 a week, like that kind of I don't have to do anything like that. And that builds trust, which builds listeners, which builds loyal listeners over time. And those people support your sponsors. And when your sponsors are like, wow, this guy really crushes for us, you get more because they're done by agencies. And the agencies say, oh, okay, our all-star podcasters are Jordan Harbinger, et cetera, et cetera. So you start to get attention from those people. And then big networks go, this show always has very good sponsors. They must be a really good show and convert well. Let's see how big they are, see if we can make them an offer to join our network. And that's how you start doing it. So ironically, when you're small, yes, it is. You can make more money selling things. But the ironic part is when you don't sell anything, your audience tends to grow faster and be more loyal because you're not selling anything. So you're able to focus on the product instead of the sales. And when the product is good and better, you outcompete the other 2 million, whatever podcasts are out there, 2.4 million, whatever it is. And that builds your listener base. And then eventually, as sponsors notice you and networks notice you, now you're starting to go, how on earth did I end up getting paid what I get paid now? Because I easily make more than, I don't know what investment bank you were at. I don't know if you're able to say, but like, I'm pretty sure that now I'm doing what the partners at that bank are doing in terms of my compensation.
Yeah.
But those guys are not only older, they've spent their entire life in the office, right? They're on wife number 3 if they've even bothered to get that far.
So we talk a lot about money on this podcast. Are you willing to share actual numbers? It's okay if you're not, but like we talk about,
not really, just because of safety stuff. Yeah, no, go ahead and ask away, but I'll give you a range.
Sure.
But I don't because I'm worried about my kids,
Yeah.
So do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious, like, are you earning between like 3 and 500 or like over 500?
Yeah, per month, more like. Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
So like, okay. Yeah, it's a lot. It's more than a partner at an investment bank.
And is that net
making,
or?
And it's going to be more. That's, yeah, I have expenses, but like, it's not, they're not that high, right? I live a normal life. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're similar to me. I've heard in your other podcasts, like you and your wife share a car, like you're not into like money and super fancy things. I'm sure like you invest like money into particular areas of your life, but like for you, like, you know what makes you happy, and a lot of that probably doesn't cost a lot of money.
It doesn't. Before people are like, whoa, we got to go kidnap that guy for ransom. I donate a lot of my money to, like, right now, I just sort of pick these charity projects and I'm like, I want to do that. So one of the latest thing I had a call about was building a community center school in Ghana that specializes in like medical education, elementary education, includes uniform, sanitation, different facilities, the whole building. I'm going to build, I'm not going to build anything. I'm going to donate the funds for someone else to build it because I don't need the money. And I know that that's a privileged position to be in. But yeah, I share a car with my wife, not just for financial reasons. It's just that it just feels bad to have a car sitting there that I ensure that I'm literally never going to use.
Yeah.
Right. I'm never going to do that. And if I need to go somewhere and my wife needs to go to another place that's in a different part of town, I can use Uber the once every 4 months that I need to do that. Right. It's just never, the costs just don't make any sense. I've got a car that's big enough to hold my kids and me and my wife and maybe my friends or parents, and that's it. So we just share one nice car. I don't need a summer home in Cannes or whatever. So, it's a rental economy, and buying stuff like just doesn't make any sense these days most of the time. And I know people say like, it's an investment. It's only an investment if it goes up. And it's only an investment if you make more from it than you do maintaining it. And that's tricky with real estate, and it doesn't happen with cars unless you are very specialized in that area, and I couldn't care less. So I don't collect anything like watches. Yeah, I grew up middle class, and I never gave a shit about material stuff because I grew up with rich kids. And I didn't feel poor because I was much happier than most of them were. And so I got to use their stuff, but I realized maybe I realized from a young age that stuff doesn't make people happy because I saw a lot of really miserable kids that had everything.
Yeah.
And it was one of those where like my high school parking lot looked like a Mercedes BMW dealership and kids had imported cars. This is a public school in Michigan. Kids had imported cars that you couldn't get in America without a special order. Like a Range Rover Defender, but the driver's side is on the other side because it's from Australia. I'm just like, I'm thinking, you're 15 years old, dude. Or you just turned 16, maybe. And it's like, what on earth is going on here? This makes no sense. So I just realized really quick, like, I like video games and I'm jealous you have them, but not jealous enough to want your shitty family life. So like there was a lot of stuff like that growing up that made me it didn't give me like bad money programming where I'm like, money makes people sad, avoid it. But it made me I had a very sober analysis of what money could do for you and what money could not do for you.
Yeah.
And I also saw people's parents trading their time with their kids for money. And I was like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. So transitioning a little bit back to just building the podcast, what I heard is, don't focus on the money in terms of podcasts, like go after a podcasting career if that's like truly like an artistic calling, which that's what it's always been for me because, one of my biggest personal values is learning. And if I can have an excuse to get someone like you on a quote unquote 100%. Call and just like pick your brain, it's like, if this thing barely makes any money, or even if I have to pay to like, have all the production done, it's such a massively valuable investment to me because it literally expands my world, expands my mind, expands my life. And so it sounds like that's essentially what you focused on in the beginning. And then you really worked on, basically you saw like you built out a network. You said you did ad swaps and built trust like with other podcasters, which then like, built up your audience, which, then your audience, like they would see you, on other people's podcasts that they loved or hear about you on other people's podcasts that they love. And so they automatically trusted you when they like came to listen to your show, fell in love with your show, and then you grew from there. So when did you transition into, and maybe you've literally you've been doing this since 2006. Like, when did you transition to like, okay, now that I've like been kind of like doing this out of pure passion, now is a good time to start generating money because it's the right time. Like, walk me through kind of that transition and how you think about it.
This is also one of those, the decision was made early enough for me that in a way that I didn't have a choice. So my old show, podcast ads really didn't exist. Even if they did, they were very, very small. It wasn't a real revenue stream. And it was primarily a lead generation vehicle. And then around like 2015 or so, I heard of friends that were making Rich Roll. You probably know him.
Love Rich Roll.
He's like, hey, I'm making all this money with podcast ads. And I was like, can you introduce me to the network? So he did. And the network was like, yeah, we're interested in signing you up. So I was like, great. So I signed up for this network and they were like, cool, here's an ad for, I don't know, like an iPhone case or some flashlight or what. I don't know. I'm looking at stuff on my desk, right? Just little stuff. And I was like, oh, cool. And so we'd make like $4-5 a month in podcast ads. It would just go into the business, no problem. Paid for the production, paid everyone's salary involved with the podcast. It turned out, and I was like, great. We just turned this into like a break-even / profit center where it was before a marketing and a cost center. Great, win. And then as time went by and the show got bigger, the network was like, hey, you're performing really well. The show's doing well. I started adding more episodes during the week. That we had more inventory. They started selling more ads, and it was like, now it's making what it made in a month in a week. This is really good. And then when I left that company and I started my new company, I was like, okay, I've got to figure this out. I got to generate revenue. I got to do this. I got to do that. So I really started focusing on the growth of the show because it really mattered more. Before it was great when you grew because you'd generate more leads, but we were sold out anyway. It didn't matter. Now it was like, okay, 80, 90% of your revenue's gone because you're not going to be doing training and events anymore. Now you need to, it's a volume game. Get more listeners, get more listeners, get more listeners. So I started doing that. And that's when, coincidentally, podcast ads were also starting to be noticed by big agencies. They're like, hey, this little tiny $500 million a year industry is really something. And then it became a $700 million and then $1 billion, whatever it is, industry. And I rode that wave because I had already been doing a show for a while. I knew how to grow my show, right? I was doing the swaps. I was appearing on other shows. I started buying ads on other shows now that I had more money coming in. And as that happened, it was a flywheel, right? I would buy ads on other shows. I'd grow by X percent. Then my network would get more ad deals for me because my show was bigger, and I'd spend that extra margin on marketing and advertising again, buying ads on other shows. And then my show would grow it bigger. And it was like I was growing 100% per year for like 4 years in a row. And that is not a sustainable pace, but it became the thing that I really, really wanted to do and it was working. And so that's when I was like, hey, this is a really good business model because even now, this is that time. It's still that time. Podcast ads are growing. More and more radio dollars, especially during the pandemic, started to shift into podcasting. TV and streaming dollars are shifting into podcasting. The digital stuff from Facebook, as Facebook's privacy stuff with Apple started to become a major issue with the tracking stuff. Now podcasting started to become even more attractive because you couldn't target specific users with podcast ads. Now you can't really do that with Facebook because of Apple's iOS privacy stuff. So it was like, well, okay, we're not going to be able to target there. We can start to test new places that we also can't target, like podcasts. So we see all this new money coming into the space. And then a couple years ago, Spotify buys Joe Rogan for $200 million and they buy Smartless for $80 million over at Amazon, and they pay $100 million for Morbid over at Amazon, and then they pay, and so now that got a bunch of attention, and it's just a really, really good time. Podcasting is super hot right now. Tech companies started buying podcasting networks and software and apps, and it hasn't stopped. So it's just a really good time to start something because in I'd say the next like 3 to 5 years, if not a little bit longer, it's hard to say. Podcasting is continually ramping up. Radio is continually ramping down. Other forms of digital that invade your privacy are ramping down. And marketing dollars are still there to be spent. So it's a great time to be in podcasting. But again, like I rode that wave because of market timing, luck, being in the right place at the right time, in addition to the other things I said about working hard to serve your audience primarily.
Yeah. So a couple questions. This is really great. I appreciate it. How many episodes per week, would you recommend, somebody who's looking to grow their podcast? I'm just going to pause and ask.
It depends. It depends because one episode a week gets shared maybe half as much as 2 episodes a week, but there is a sort of finite amount where your quality goes down because you're doing way too much work and you're not able to do the right kind of work. I released 3, but one of them is an advice episode where people write in with questions and me and my producer, we craft answers with subject matter experts, right? So you write in like, my neighbor's doing this, how do I do it? And we consult a lawyer or whatever, and we help solve your problem. The other 2 are interviews. 2 interviews a week is tough, man. I got to spend 10 hours, whatever it is, prepping the guest, all that stuff. So a lot of people, they try and do these daily shows, and you can really tell that the quality is low. They ask the same questions of each guest. They don't prepare. They do nothing other than read the bio for the guest. I mean, it is not quality.
Yeah.
And those shows don't really grow that much.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. They churn a lot. They're boring. They churn, they lose listeners as fast as they gain them or so. But if you're doing quality work, you can only keep it up so much.
Yeah.
And even if you could do 5 quality shows a week, your audience is probably not going to consume that much. So there is a sweet spot, and it's really going to be like 1 or 2 episodes a week.
Yeah. Hey there, just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. Today's show is brought to you by Fit Rich Vegan. If you're ready to get in the best shape of your life, double your income, and 10x your savings and investments, then this is the coaching program for you. But wait a minute, Dragon. Isn't this your coaching program? Heck yeah, it is. I spent the last 8 years mastering my fitness and my finances, and I've built an incredible coaching program with an incredible team to help you get the body of your dreams and finally achieve that level of financial success that you've been seeking. So if you want to find out if you're a good fit for the program, go to fitrichvegan.com and book your free consultation today. Or you can just DM me on Instagram with the words fitrichvegan and we can chat about if it's going to be a good fit for you. I'm committed to empowering people to actually achieve their fitness and financial goals. I spent the last 20 years trying to figure this out on my own. And what I realized is the key to doing it is not doing it alone. You have to have coaches, you have to have mentors, and you have to be a part of masterminds. And that's exactly what Fit Rich Vegan has. It has coaches, mentors, and it is a mastermind. So again, if you're ready to book your free consultation today, go to fitrichvegan.com or drop me a DM on Instagram. Yeah, I have no interest in doing the daily podcast, but I think for me right now, like I love doing at least one interview a week. And I think for me, my next step is like to do like some sort of solo episode as a second episode, because that's what would be fun and exciting to me. You know?
Yeah.
So curious, like, how do you get on a network? Like, you know, it sounded like it was kind of luck with you with Rich Roll, but like,
Yeah. I was paying attention to the different networks that were cropping up, kind of like the early ones that existed. There were only a handful, tiny handful, really a tiny handful. And I was like, can I join? And they were like, oh, you're too small. We're not interested. That was pretty much it. And then I was like, how big do I have to be? And then I'd get there and they'd be like, oh, we raised our requirement. You got to be this big now. I'm like, oh, crap. So I just kept doing that. And then eventually I joined Podcast One, and Podcast One was like, yeah, we'll take you on. And then we started growing and growing and growing. They're like, oh, this is a good one for us. So that was always fun. That was always great. And that's how I did it. You know, I just really started to reach out and be like, I know I'm small now. One of the things I did early was I remember being so small that they wouldn't take the show because it was like 5,000 or 10,000 downloads an episode or whatever it was. And I said, you don't have to pay me in money. You can give me store credit in your ads marketplace, and I will use the money I earn from you running your ads and I will spend it back with you, all of it, because you don't have to actually pay me anything. And so they were like, oh, sure, we'll do that. So I would run a bunch of ads, end up with a bunch of store credit, and then go like, all right, I want an ad on Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I want an ad on such and such comedy show. I want an ad on here, and I would spend it, and then people would be like, oh, I heard your ad on Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson. So my show would start to slowly grow, and they'd be like, hey, you're growing a lot. Your ads are doing better. You're earning more store credit. And then eventually I just converted I got an offer from Podcast One, and I was like, I want cash now. I want money, and they're like, okay, great. So I joined them. And then I, again, started to be like, can I get ads on other shows that aren't sold? And they're like, oh, I don't see why not. Those are just going to go to waste. And I was like, how much are you making putting in house ads? And they're like, oh, $5 CPM for some of these. And I'm like, great, I'll take 1 million impressions. Right. So
that's genius.
It turned out to be a real, it was good. It was a good purchase.
That's a total entrepreneurial
really
move. Like seriously, like you were so not focused on the money and just on the growth. And you were looking for like entrepreneurial like ways in order to grow. And I really I appreciate you. Like, I would have never thought of that. Like, I mean, maybe I would have like 5 years from now or a few years from now, but now it's like, holy shit, like, there we go. That's great. Yeah. So I know we got to wrap this up because you got another call. So I'm just curious, in closing, is there any kind of like last words of wisdom that you would like to share with the audience or anything of particular note?
Yeah. I mean, look, as far as podcasting is concerned, and this goes for many/most artistic pursuits, viewing it as a business is a great way to ruin something that you think is fun. I don't usually advise people to turn a hobby into a business because it's a real good way. First of all, you don't do that with other hobbies. No one's like, oh man, I can't wait till I start making money from building Legos, right? Nobody in their right mind says I'm going to try and monetize my model train set building hobby. It's ridiculous. But somehow with podcasting, since there are people doing it for a living, they're like, I got to do it where it's monetized. And it's like, why? So don't do that, because not only are you ruining your hobby for the most part, many of the time, just start to focus on the wrong things. And that's actually true for a lot of businesses. A lot of people will do some sort of craft and they're like, I'm going to start selling these. Great, fine, go on Etsy and do your thing. But what you should not do is quit your day job and then be like, I have to make 100 of these a month or I'm going to go broke. Because now every day you wake up having to make one of these, you're like, fuck, I cannot, I hate this. You just ruined your hobby. Why? So you could say you're a professional mask maker for Halloween costumes. Like, why did you do that to yourself? There's nothing wrong with having a little side hustle. There's nothing wrong with having a hobby that doesn't make any money. So, and it gets you to focus on the right things. Doing the show was a hobby, then it was a lead magnet for another business, then it became a revenue stream, and then it became a larger revenue stream, and then it became an enormous revenue stream, and that's by design. Yeah. Right? And I have a lot of opportunities even now to scale and grow, and it's like, do this and you'll make more. And I look and I go, how much extra time is it? Yep. If it's above 0, it's a real hard sell, because I've got 2 little kids and I don't want to do an extra episode a week for an extra $1 million or whatever it is. I just don't want to do it. And I'm going to end up giving away that $1 million anyway. So why, instead of doing that, don't I simply take the time back? And that's what I think people should be optimizing for, is flexibility, time, freedom, really, is one good way to say that. Whether you have kids or not, you're never going to regret having that freedom. And I think that's worth optimizing for, as opposed to finances, because we've all seen the data. Any money you make over $73,000, the marginal increase in happiness is virtually nothing until you hit like $500 million a year and you're flying in your own jet or whatever it is. I'm going to have to look up this graph, but you know what I'm talking about, right? That graph. Yeah. And so unless you think you have a reasonable shot at getting there, and you are not just being delusional, and you have the desire to work that hard to get there, just stop at the thing that you're at where you're peak happy, and then optimize for freedom after that. Nobody's like, damn, I only work 3 days a week doing this thing that I love. You can always do something else with your time. And so that's where I'm at right now. And I highly advise other people to do the same thing, because there's far too many people out there working their lives away, and it's never worth it. Yeah. Beautiful place to end. Jordan, thank you so much for coming on the show. You're Jordan Harbinger everywhere. Like, that's the name of your show. That's where you're at on Instagram, all the socials. So if you haven't listened to Jordan's show, definitely give it a listen. It's amazing. You'll become a better thinker. You will literally, it's entertaining, it's educational, it's empowering, it's inspiring. So definitely check them out. Jordan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for tuning in. And remember, literally everything can be used as an opportunity to learn, to heal, to grow, and to transform. So whatever is going on in your life, choose to consciously and proactively harness that energy and use it to alchemize your life to the next level. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or on your favorite social media, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. As always, you can find me at Justin David Carl on Instagram and all the socials, as well as at alchemizelife.com on the web. Until the next time, sending you lots of energy and plenty of dragon magic.